According to the Census Bureau, nearly 3 million U.S. homes and 13 million apartments are now owned by an LLC, an LLP, or a shell company. It is the highest level of anonymous ownership seen in American history.
Reveal at the Center for Investigative Reporting began investigating just exactly who these anonymous owners are, but their FOIA request has been denied. Reveal has now filed a complaint in the U.S. District Court arguing that the government has no lawful basis for declining to release those records. Here via Skype to expand on the legal battle and their investigation is senior reporter at Reveal, Aaron Glantz. He's also the author of Home Wreckers: How a Gang of Wall Street Kingpins, Hedge Fund Magnates, Crooked Banks, and Vulture Capitalists suckered millions out of their homes and demolished the American dream, which is an amazing title, and it's a great book. And you are a fabulous reporter. I'm glad to have you on the show, Aaron. Great to see you.
Good to see you, Aaron.
Thank you.
All right, so what is going on? Why are so many homes being owned by random anonymous shell companies?
Well, I mean, you go back to the Great Recession, right? And homes were foreclosed on. 8 million families lost their homes. But all of those homes didn't just disappear, right? They ended up being bought by somebody. And those somebodies often turned out to be cash buyers, people who came to the court or even bought properties in bulk with bundles of cash. And so we wanted to know who these guys were. I identified some of them in my book as connected to Donald Trump and the Trump administration, but obviously that's only part of it. So what about the rest of these 3 million homes that are now owned by shell companies? It turns out the Treasury Department has been requesting this information from shell company buyers for some time. They're concerned about money laundering. So we filed a Freedom of Information Act request asking them for that information. They denied us. We appealed. We filed again. And now we're suing them.
Mm-hmm. So, Aaron, tell us about what is the danger of having LLCs and anonymous ownership? Is it just more and more kind of private equity encroachment into the housing market and making it just, more of a financial asset than actual home ownership?
I mean, that's the beginning. That's where we start, right? When you have something that used to be owned by a family or a mom and pop landlord that cares about the community, and now it is owned by a distant Wall Street investor that is worried only about returns. You can see landlords who skimp on maintenance. You can see rents that go up and up and up. And this is a big reason why the wealth gap between the richest 0.1% and the other 90% is greater than we've seen in 100 years. But that's just part of it. The Treasury Department and collecting this data because they're worried about money laundering. They're worried about foreign actors parking their money in U.S. real estate to avoid taxes in their own country. And this, of course, can cause housing in some of our cities where housing crisis is at epidemic proportions. We have new buildings going up that are oftentimes sold, but just sitting there vacant. Right? Because instead of being used for housing, they're just being used as laundromats. So that would be another concern. And the amount of transparency around corporate ownership, shell company ownership of real estate in America is considerably lower than most European countries, Argentina, Israel, Russia, Ukraine. In a lot of these countries, you can just go online and see who's behind the corporate owner that owns your building. In America, we have no such law.
Wow.
And I know there was a good bit of reporting done about this problem in New York where your point is exactly right. I mean, rents are insane in New York and Manhattan. I mean, a working class person can't touch anything in Manhattan. Michael Bloomberg called it a luxury good. And meanwhile, you have these vacant buildings and condos being bought up by people who will never live there just for whatever reasons. Do you know, are there certain cities, certain locations in the country that are hotspots for that kind of money laundering activity?
Yeah, we're looking at New York, Miami, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Chicago, Seattle, San Antonio, Dallas. These are some of the cities where the Treasury Department has begun collecting data about who owns this residential real estate, who really owns it. Not just ABC, LLC, 123 Shell Company, but really the true owner because of their about concentration purposes. In a lot of these cities, you're looking at 30–40% of all residential home purchases are being made with cash, often by shell companies. And so if you're looking around wondering, why can't I buy a house, right? Why am I stuck paying more and more in rent? It's because these people or these shells have cut in line in front of you and showed up with ready cash and taken that home off the market before you even had a chance to buy it with a mortgage. And so what we're asking in our FOIA suit is for the Treasury Department to tell us what they already know about this problem.
Wow. And so, I mean, what are some of the things that we can learn, or is there any other legislation or anybody who's trying to highlight a fix to this problem? Because it sounds like a problem of registration of LLCs itself. Is it because of a state and national guide? Just take us some in behind that.
Well, I mean, there is legislation right now that's already passed, that's over at the Senate, that would require additional disclosure of this beneficial ownership information to the Treasury Department, and it would create a national registry. This is bipartisan legislation because of concern about money laundering. But one of the things that this legislation does not do is mandate that whatever the Treasury Department learns, it has to share it with the public. So you and I know the answers to these questions.
Right.
And that's what we're trying to unmask in our FOIA suit. The Treasury Department is saying that because of the Bank Secrecy Act, they can't share this information with us or the public. We're saying the Bank Secrecy Act was designed to hide very personal information from the public, like people's social security numbers and other, personal financial information, that there was no real public interest in everyone knowing, and real privacy concerns, not something as prosaic as who owns the building next door or who bought into that condo tower.
Yeah,
right. People deserve to know what's going on right there in their own neighborhoods. Aaron, thank you so much for working on this.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely.
And we'll have more Rising for you right after this.